The darkness of space held countless stars, but today it held something more. Captain Temin Park stood on the bridge of the HSS Defiant, his eyes fixed on the viewing screen. The alien fleet had arrived exactly where intelligence predicted they would. 12 massive ships, each one gleaming with advanced technology that made them look more like floating cities than vessels of war. "Distance?" Temin asked, his voice calm. 40,000 kilometers in holding, Lieutenant Hannah Song replied from her tactical station. Her fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease. They're maintaining formation. No aggressive posturing yet, Temin nodded slowly. The Vrexians had finally come. For 3 months, both sides had danced around each other in the neutral zone. Diplomatic messages went back and forth, each one more tense than the last. The Vrexians claimed this sector of space belonged to them by ancient right. Humanity claimed it by the simple fact that their colony ships had arrived first. Neither side wanted war, but neither side wanted to back down either. "We're receiving a transmission," said Ensign Giwan Kang from communications. "They're requesting we power down our weapons and allow them to scan our vessel." Around the bridge, several crew members stiffened. Allowing an enemy to scan your ship was like opening your home to a burglar and showing them where you kept your valuables. But Temin had expected this. The Vrexians were curious. They had never encountered humanity before, and their arrogance was well documented. They believed themselves the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. "What are your orders, Captain?" Hannah asked. Her hand hovered over the weapons console, ready to bring the ship's considerable arsenal online at a moment's notice. Temin considered for a moment. The Defiant was alone, 1 ship against 12. But that was the point. Command had sent the Defiant specifically because of what it represented. Not humanity's largest ship, not its most powerful, just a standard patrol cruiser. If the Vrexians wanted to understand what they were dealing with, let them look. "Send a response," Temin said. "Tell them we agree to their request. We will maintain current position and allow their scan. Weapons will remain in standby mode, but make it clear that any hostile action will be met with immediate retaliation." Giwan's fingers flew across her console. "Message sent, sir." Temin walked to the front of the bridge, clasping his hands behind his back. Through the view screen, he could see the lead Vrexian ship, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed the Defiant. Lights began to pulse along its hull as its scanning systems activated. "They're beginning their scan," Hannah reported. "Deep level. They're not being subtle about it. Let them look," Temin said quietly. "Let them see everything." On board the Vrexian flagship, Admiral Krevnax watched the displays with satisfaction. The human ship sat motionless, allowing the scan as requested. Good. They understood their place. The Vrexian Empire had conquered 17 star systems. They had fought and defeated 4 different alien species. These humans would learn to respect Vrexian superiority soon enough, Report Krevnax commanded. His science officer, a thin Vrexian named Dralix, studied the incoming data. "The scan is progressing. Initial readings show ... This is unexpected." "Explain," Krevnax said. "The whole composition is unusual," Dralix said slowly. "It appears to be a reactive composite material. Not simple metal alloy, as we expected. The molecular structure suggests it can adapt to different types of impacts." Krevnax frowned. That was more advanced than he had anticipated. "What about their weapons?" "Still analyzing. The scan will take several minutes to complete. Their ship is larger than it appears externally. The internal structure is very dense." Back on the Defiant, Temin allowed himself a small smile. "The Vrexians were about to get an education." "Captain," said Lieutenant Yuna Choi from the science station, "I'm monitoring their scan. They've penetrated the outer hull and are beginning to analyze our power systems." "How long until they reach the weapons bays?" Temin asked. Yuna checked her instruments. "Approximately 2 minutes." "They're being thorough," Temin nodded. "Commander Lee, status of the crew?" Commander Minho Lee, the executive officer, consulted his datapad. "All departments report ready, sir. Medical bay is on standby. Engineering reports all systems functioning at optimal levels. Marines are suited up and ready in case of boarding action." "Good," Temin said. "Maintain readiness but stay relaxed. We're not looking for a fight, not looking for one, Hannah muttered from tactical, but ready to finish one if it starts. Taman shot her a look, but there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. Hannah was one of his best officers precisely because of that attitude. She understood what the Defiant truly was. On the Vrexian flagship, the mood was changing. Dralik stared at his displays in growing confusion. Admiral, the power readings, ... They cannot be correct. What do you mean? Krevnax demanded. The energy signature from their main reactor. It suggests antimatter containment, but the scale is massive, far beyond anything we've achieved. Dralix's voice took on a note of disbelief. If these readings are accurate, that single ship has enough power generation to supply one of our colony worlds. Krevnax felt the first stirring of unease. Perhaps their systems are simply inefficient. They waste power. Perhaps, Dralik said, but he did not sound convinced. Admiral, there's something else. I'm detecting unusual biological signatures throughout the ship. They're scattered in patterns that don't make tactical sense. Why would they have so many crew members in non-essential areas? Continue the scan, Krevnax ordered. I want to know everything about that vessel. Temin watched the timer count down on his display. The Vrexians would reach the weapons base soon. Then the real surprise would begin. He thought about what they would find there. Railguns capable of punching through a moon, fusion torpedoes that burned hotter than a sun's core, kinetic missiles that could crack a planet's crust, and worse things, much worse things. The Vrexians thought they were the apex predators of the galaxy. They had never fought a species that had been at war with itself for 10,000 years. They had never encountered a civilization that had nearly destroyed its own homeworld 3 times before finally learning to work together. They had never met humanity. Hannah said quietly. They've reached the weapons systems. Atiman's smile faded. Here we go. Dralik stared at his screen and felt his blood run cold. The numbers made no sense. They had to be wrong. He ran the analysis again, then a third time. The results remained the same. Admiral, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You need to see this. Krevnax moved to stand beside his science officer. What is it? The weapons system, sir. There. Dralik struggled to find words. They're beyond anything in our database. Look here, he pointed to a schematic that was building on the screen. These are magnetic accelerators, railguns, but the power levels they can achieve would allow them to fire projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. ... Kinetic weapons? How primitive. Not primitive, sir. Devastating. A single shot from one of these weapons could destroy one of our cruisers. The kinetic energy alone would be enough too. Dralix trailed off as new data appeared. Admiral, I'm reading fusion warheads. Hundreds of them. Each one yields approximately 50 megatons. The bridge fell silent. 50 megatons was more than the Vrexian Empire used to crack asteroids for mining. The humans had hundreds of them loaded on a single ship. It must be some mistake, Krevnax said, but his voice lacked conviction. No mistake, sir. And there's more. Dralix's hands shook slightly as he pulled up another display. I'm detecting chemical weapons. Biological weapons. And these signatures here? I think they're nuclear devices. Fission-based warheads. Dozens of them. Krevnax felt the world tilt slightly. Nuclear weapons. Chemical weapons. Biological agents. The Vrexian Empire had banned such weapons over 3,000 years ago. After a civil war had nearly destroyed their homeworld, they were considered too horrific, too indiscriminate. Only the most barbaric species would still use them.
How old is their civilization?
Krevnax asked slowly. Dr. Al Single quotes I checked his database. Their messages claim they achieved spaceflight approximately 300 years ago. But their planet shows signs of industrial development going back at least 2,000 years. And in all that time, they never outlawed weapons of mass destruction? It appears not, sir. Dralix paused. Admiral, I'm picking up more unusual readings. The ship's internal structure is very strange. There are massive sections devoted to medical facilities. Far more than any warship should need. On the Defiant, Lieutenant Yuna Choi monitored the alien scans with quiet satisfaction. She had been chosen for this mission specifically because of her background in physics. She understood exactly what the Vrexians were discovering. They found the weapons, she reported to Captain Teeman. And the medical bays. Teeman nodded. What's their reaction? Their scan patterns are becoming erratic, Yuna said. They keep rerunning the same analysis. I think they're having trouble believing what they're seeing. Let them take their time, Teeman said. Understanding is important. Lieutenant Sora Kim, the ship's chief medical officer, stood in her Domain 5 deck. Below the bridge. The medical bay was her kingdom, and she ran it with quiet efficiency. Around her, automated systems hummed softly. Rows of medical beds stood empty, but ready. Cloning tanks lined one wall, capable of growing replacement organs in ours. Neural backup stations waited to preserve the consciousness of dying crew members. Dr. Kim, one of her nurses, said, "The aliens are scanning us. They seem very interested in this section." Sora smiled. "I imagine they are. How many ships in the galaxy carry a full trauma center capable of handling mass casualties?" "Not many, I'd guess. Must seem strange to them," the nurse said. "Strange," Sora agreed. "Or terrifying. Depends on how they think about it." The nurse looked puzzled. Terrifying? Why would medical facilities be terrifying? Sora began checking the supply cabinets, ensuring everything was properly stocked. Because, my dear, medical facilities like these send a very clear message. We expect to take casualties. Heavy casualties. We expect our people to be wounded, burned, irradiated, poisoned, and we've built entire sections of our ships dedicated to putting them back together so they can fight again. She closed a cabinet door softly. That's not the thinking of a peaceful species. That's the thinking of survivors. Back on the Vrexian flagship, the discoveries kept coming. A tactical analyst named Valthera had taken over part of the scanning operation, focusing specifically on the military aspects of the human vessel. Admiral Valthera said, "I've completed analysis of their defensive systems. The hull plating is remarkable. It's a composite material that can harden in response to impacts. Essentially, the harder you hit it, the harder it becomes. And look here," she highlighted a section of the schematic. "These are repair drones. Thousands of them stored throughout the ship. They can patch hull breaches, reroute power, even rebuild damaged sections while under fire." Krevnax was beginning to understand. "They designed this ship to take damage, sir. Significant damage. The redundancy in their systems is extraordinary. They have backup power systems, backup life support, backup weapons. If you disabled half this ship, the other half could still fight effectively." Dralix spoke up again. "Admiral, I've been analyzing their database. I'm finding historical records. Battle records. Sir, these humans have been fighting wars continuously for their entire recorded history." "Continuously?" Krevnax said. "That's not possible. No species could survive that." "The records are clear, sir. In the last 500 years alone, they fought 2 global conflicts that killed hundreds of millions of their own people. They've used nuclear weapons against each other, chemical weapons, biological plagues, and they survived all of it." The bridge of the Vrexian flagship had gone completely quiet. Every officer was staring at the displays, at the schematic of the human warship, and the terrifying inventory it carried.
How many crew does that ship have?
Krevnax asked quietly. 347 humans, sir, Valthera replied. "And they're all soldiers?" "No, sir. From what I can determine, only about 60 are dedicated military personnel. The rest are scientists, engineers, medical staff, support crew." Krevnax felt a chill run down his spine. "Then why do they all show elevated combat readiness in their biological scans?" Valthara checked her data. I don't know, sir. Their heart rates are steady. Adrenaline levels slightly elevated but controlled. Neural patterns suggest constant tactical awareness. It's as if every single one of them is ready for combat at any moment." On the Defiant, Captain Temin received a report from Commander Minho Lee. "Hey, sir. The crew is wondering how long we're going to sit here and let them scan us." Taman considered. "How long have they been scanning?" 18 minutes, sir. Give them another 10 minutes. I want them to see everything. I want them to understand exactly what we are. Minho nodded slowly. Understood, sir? Though I think they're starting to get the picture. Starting to tame in agreed. But understanding and truly believing are two different things. Let's make sure they believe, Commander Minho Lee walked through the corridors of the Defiant with the easy confidence of a man who knew his ship inside and out. He had served on her for 4 years, and in that time he had learned every system, every backup protocol, every secret the ship held. Now, as the aliens scanned them, he felt a strange sense of pride. Commander, a young engineer said as Minho passed. Is it true the aliens are looking at everything? Everything, Minho confirmed. Captain's orders. Let them see what they're dealing with. The engineer grinned. I bet they're getting an education. That's one way to put it, Minho said. He continued walking, heading toward the medical section. He wanted to check in with Dr. Kim, make sure she was ready for whatever came next. On the Virexian flagship, the mood had shifted from curiosity to something approaching horror. Dralix had been analyzing the human ship for 23 minutes now, and every new discovery was worse than the last. Admiral, he said, his voice strained. I've calculated the percentage of ship mass devoted to medical facilities. It's over 40%. Krevnax turned to stare at him. 40%? That's impossible. No warship dedicates that much space to medical care. This one does, sir. And it's not just basic medical care. They have trauma centers that could handle hundreds of critical patients simultaneously. They have cloning facilities, neural backup systems, radiation treatment chambers, chemical decontamination units, everything you would need to treat every conceivable type of battlefield injury. Felthara spoke up from her station. Sir, I think I understand why. I've been studying their tactical doctrine based on ship layout and system priorities. These humans don't plan for victory through overwhelming force. They plan for victory through attrition, explained Krevnak said. They expect to take massive casualties, sir. They expect their ship to be damaged, their crew to be injured or killed. But they've engineered ways to keep fighting anyway. Clone new bodies for consciousness transfers. Repair catastrophic injuries. Even bring people back from clinical death. They're not trying to avoid casualties. They're trying to make casualties irrelevant. The implications settled over the bridge like a dark cloud. These were not warriors who fought for glory or honor. These were survivors who fought to the last breath and beyond. There's something else, Dralix said quietly. I've been examining their weapons more closely. The nuclear devices, the chemical weapons, the biological agents, they're not stored in a restricted armory. They're distributed throughout the weapons bays alongside conventional munitions, as if they're just another tool. They are, a voice said. Everyone turned to look at the tactical officer who had spoken. To them, I mean, these weapons that we banned millennia ago, that we consider too terrible to use, to humans, they're just weapons. Part of their standard arsenal. Krevnax felt sick. What kind of species thinks that way? On the Defiant, Lieutenant Sora Kim stood in her medical bay and ran a diagnostic on the cloning tanks. Everything checked out perfectly. She had 6 tanks ready to produce replacement organs and 3 full-body tanks for more serious cases. In the next room, neural backup stations stood ready to download a dying person's consciousness and preserve it until a new body could be prepared. 8, Doctor, one of her assistants said. Do you really think we'll need all this? Sora looked at the young woman. I hope not. But hope is not a strategy. We prepare for the worst and pray for the best. That's what keeps people alive. It seems so pessimistic.
Oh.
Sora said firmly. It's realistic. Our ancestors learned the hard way that hoping for peace doesn't prevent war. Being prepared for war is what gives peace a chance. Commander Minho arrived at the medical bay entrance. Dr. Kim, status report. All systems operational, Commander. We're ready for anything. Minho nodded. Good. The captain wants to run battle drills in 10 minutes. Just exercises, but the aliens will be watching. Understood. We'll participate. Minho left, and Sora turned to her staff. You heard the commander. Battle drill in 10 minutes. Everyone to stations. The medical bay erupted into organized chaos as staff members moved to their assigned positions. Automated systems activated, preparing for incoming casualties that wouldn't actually come. But the practice was important. In a real battle, there would be no time to figure out who did what. On the Verexian flagship, sensors detected the sudden activity aboard the human ship. "Admiral," Velthara called out. "The human vessel is activating combat systems." Krevnax jumped to his feet. "Are they powering weapons?" "No, sir. But crew members are moving to battle stations. Their medical facilities just went to full readiness. Damage control teams are suiting up." "Why?" Krevnax demanded. "Are they expecting us to attack?" Dralix studied his instruments. "I don't think so, sir. The pattern suggests a drill. They're practicing combat procedures." Krevnax watched the displays as the human crew moved with frightening efficiency. Within 90 seconds, every station was manned. Within 2 minutes, all combat systems showed ready status. It was the most professional military response he had ever witnessed. "How long would it take our crew to achieve battle readiness?" he asked quietly. "From cold status?" Velthara said. "Approximately 8 minutes, sir. It did it in 2. "Yes, sir," Dralix interrupted. "Admiral, I've accessed more of their historical database. You need to see this." A new display appeared, showing a timeline of human history. Wars marked it like a scar running through the centuries. The Great War, the Second Great War, the nuclear exchange, the resource wars, dozens of smaller conflicts, hundreds of battles. "They've never known peace," Dralix said softly. "Not real peace. The longest period without major warfare in their recorded history is 63 years. 63 years out of thousands." Krevnax stared at the timeline. No wonder they're so prepared. War is their natural state. "It's worse than that, sir," Velthara added. "I've analyzed their cultural database. Their literature, their entertainment, their art, it's all about conflict, struggle, survival. Even their children's stories feature violence and combat. They raise their young to be warriors. In a sense, yes. Not formally, but culturally. They teach their children about famous battles. They create games that simulate warfare. They glorify their military heroes. War is woven into the very fabric of their society." On the Defiant, the drill concluded successfully. Captain Temin reviewed the results with satisfaction. 2 minutes and 3 seconds to full battle readiness. Not bad, but they could do better. "Stand down from drill status," he ordered. "Return to standard watch." Throughout the ship, crew members relaxed slightly, though they remained alert. This was normal for them. The constant readiness, the awareness that violence could come at any moment. They had been raised in a culture that understood one simple truth. Peace was temporary, but war was always possible. Lieutenant Hannah Song reviewed the weapon systems one final time before securing them. Everything was in perfect order. The railguns were calibrated. The missiles were armed. The point defense systems were ready. If the aliens decided to attack, they would get a very nasty surprise. But Hannah didn't think they would attack. Not anymore. Not after seeing what the Defiant truly was. Ensign Giwan Kong was young, only 23 years old. But she had already served on 2 different ships before being assigned to the Defiant. She sat at her navigation console, monitoring the alien fleet's movements with practiced ease. Even while running drills, part of her mind was always calculating escape routes, attack vectors, defensive positions. It was second nature to her now, Ensign Captain Temin said. "What's the alien fleet doing?" Quan checked her displays. "They've shifted into a more defensive formation, sir. Spreading out. Looks like they're preparing for possible combat, but they're not taking aggressive positions." "They're afraid," Lieutenant Hannah observed from tactical. "They've seen enough." Taman nodded slowly. "Perhaps, but fear alone isn't enough. They need to understand." On the Vrexian flagship, Dralix had made a breakthrough. He had managed to access deeper layers of the human database, beyond the military specifications and into the historical archives. What he found there made him wish he hadn't looked. "Admiral," he said, his voice hollow, "I've found their war records. Detailed accounts of their major conflicts." Krevnax walked over, and Dralix pulled up a document. "This is from something they call the Second Great War. It lasted 6 years. During that time, they killed over 70 million of their own species. The number hung in the air like a physical thing. 70 million deaths. In 6 years, the Verxian Empire's worst civil war, thousands of years ago, had killed perhaps 10 million over a generation." "That can't be right," Krevnax said. "The database must be corrupted." "It's not, sir. I've cross-referenced multiple sources. They've built camps specifically designed to kill people efficiently. They firebombed their own cities. They used nuclear weapons on populated areas. And here, look at this." Brought up another file. "This is from an earlier conflict. They used chemical weapons extensively. Poison gas that burned lungs, blistered skin, caused blindness. They dug trenches and fought over meters of ground for months at a time." Valthera joined them, her face pale. "I found something in their medical database. Studies on radiation exposure, chemical burns, biological warfare effects. They've documented everything. Every weapon, every injury, every way to harm and kill, and they've used all of it. On each other." Krevnax felt the room spinning. These weren't just warriors. These were survivors of a species-wide trauma that had lasted for thousands of years. They had done terrible things to each other and learned to live with it. "What kind of beings are they?" he whispered. Dr. Als pulled up another file. "This is interesting, sir. After their last major global conflict, they formed something called the United Earth Alliance. For the first time in their history, the entire species came together. They banned certain weapons, established rules for warfare, created international laws." "So they learned," Krevnax said, grasping at hope. "They became civilized." "In a sense," Dralix said carefully, "but look at this. They still maintain massive military forces. They still research weapons. They still prepare for war. They just made rules about how to fight it." On the Defiant, Captain Tiemann received a communication request from the alien flagship. He accepted it, and Admiral Krevnax's face appeared on the screen. The alien looked shaken, his skin tone slightly paler than before. "Captain Park," Krevnax said carefully, "we have completed our scan of your vessel." "I assumed as much," Tiemann replied calmly. "I trust you found it informative." "Informative," Krevnax repeated. "That is one word for it. Captain, I must ask, the weapons you carry, the biological agents, the chemical weapons, the nuclear devices, are these standard for all human vessels?" Tiemann considered how to answer. "Admiral, the Defiant is a patrol cruiser, a medium-class vessel. We have 16 ships larger than this one and over 200 smaller ones. Some carry more weapons, some carry fewer. But yes, our military vessels are armed with what we consider necessary to defend humanity." Krevnax closed his eyes briefly. "Your species has fought wars that killed hundreds of millions. You have poisoned your own planet, nearly destroyed your own civilization, used weapons of horror against each other. And yet you survived." "We did," Tiemann confirmed. "We learned. We adapted. We became stronger, or more dangerous." "Perhaps both," Tiemann said. "Admiral, I understand what you must be thinking. You've seen our weapons, our preparations, our history. You're wondering what kind of monsters we are? Are you monsters?" Krevnax asked bluntly. Tiemann was quiet for a moment. "We are what survival made us. Our planet was harsh. Our early history was brutal. We fought over resources, territory, ideologies. We made terrible mistakes and paid terrible prices. But we survived. And eventually, we learned that working together was better than tearing each other apart. Yet you still prepare for war. Because we remember what war costs," Tiemann said quietly. "We remember the millions who died. We remember the cities that burned. We remember the poison gas, the nuclear fire, the plagues. We remember all of it. And we swore that if we ever had to fight again, we would be ready. We would be strong enough that our enemies would think twice before attacking us. Krevnak stared at the human captain. You built this ship not to conquer, but to deter. Yes, the Defiant exists so that we never have to use it to its full potential. Our weapons are terrible because we want our enemies to see them and choose peace instead. On the bridge of the Defiant, the crew listened to their captain's words with quiet pride. This was why they served. Not for glory or conquest, but for protection. For deterrence. For the hope that their very existence would prevent the wars they had trained so hard to fight. Ensign Juan felt a swell of emotion. She had joined the service because her grandfather had fought in the resource wars. He had seen friends die, cities fall, families torn apart. He had made her promise that if she ever had the chance to prevent such horror, she would take it. Serving on the Defiant was her way of keeping that promise. Krevnak spoke again. Captain Park, what would happen if we attacked you? Right now, 12 ships against one. Timon's expression didn't change. We would fight. We would take heavy damage. We would lose people. But we would take several of your ships with us. And then, Admiral, the rest of humanity would come. And they would be angry. How angry? Angry enough to turn this into the kind of war that neither of our species would survive, Timon said flatly. We don't want that, Admiral. We came to the stars looking for new beginnings, not new enemies. But if you force us to fight, we will bring 10,000 years of warfare experience to bear. We will use every terrible weapon we've ever created. We will fight with the desperation of a species that knows extinction is the alternative. And we will not stop until we win or until we're all dead. The channel was silent for a long moment. I believe you, Krevnak said finally. Captain Park, I am going to request a diplomatic meeting. Face to face. I think we need to talk. Temmin nodded. I agree, Admiral. I'll prepare to receive you. The shuttle bay of the Defiant was a large, functional space designed for practical purposes rather than ceremony. But today, it served as a meeting ground between two species that had come dangerously close to war. Captain Temmin Park stood waiting with a small honor guard as the Vexian shuttle settled onto the deck with a soft hiss of landing thrusters. Admiral Krevnax emerged first, followed by 2 aides and a security officer. The Vexians were tall, easily to meters, with gray-blue skin and large dark eyes. They moved carefully, looking around the shuttle bay with obvious nervousness. Admiral Taman said, stepping forward with a slight bow. Welcome aboard the Defiant. Krevnax returned the gesture. Thank you for receiving us, Captain. I know the circumstances are unusual. These are unusual times, Taman replied. Please allow me to show you around. I think a tour might be helpful. As they walked through the corridors, Taman could see the Vexians taking in every detail. The walls were functional metal with exposed conduits and access panels every few meters. Everything was designed for easy repair and modification. There was no decoration, no wasted space. This way, Taman said, leading them toward the aft sections. I'd like you to meet some of our crew. They entered a large room filled with equipment and displays. Dr. Deho Shin looked up from a console and smiled warmly. He was an older man, perhaps 60, with gray hair and kind eyes. Admiral Krevnax, Deho said, extending his hand. I'm Dr. Shin, the ship's historian and cultural officer. Krevnax hesitantly took the offered hand, mimicking the human gesture. Historian. On a warship. We believe understanding history helps us avoid repeating it, Deho explained. Would you like to see our library? He gestured to the walls, which were lined with data storage units. We carry over 50,000 texts on board. Military strategy, historical battles, cultural studies, philosophy. We believe educated warriors make better decisions than ignorant ones. One of the Vexian aides was examining a display. This is a tactical manual on siege warfare, and this one is about chemical weapon deployment strategies. We study all aspects of warfare, Deho said calmly. Not because we want to use these methods, but because we want to understand them. Knowledge is our best defense. Krevnax felt a chill. Even their scholars studied war. They moved on to another section. Here they found a large, open space filled with equipment. Young humans were training, some running on machines, others lifting weights, still others practicing hand-to-hand combat techniques. "This is our fitness center," Taman explained. "Every crew member maintains combat readiness, regardless of their primary role." A Vrexian aide pointed to a group in the corner. "Those are children." Indeed, 3 young humans, no more than 12 years old, were practicing on a simulation machine. The display showed them calculating trajectories and timing sequences. "Education module," Taman said. "We teach mathematics through practical applications, ballistics, orbital mechanics, trajectory calculations. Makes the lessons more engaging." Krevnax watched the children laugh as they solved complex equations by figuring out how to hit simulated targets. They were learning warfare as a game. It was disturbing and impressive in equal measure. Captain Krevnax said slowly, "How do you raise children in such an environment?" Taman considered. "We teach them the truth, Admiral. We don't hide our history or pretend the universe is safe. We show them what humanity has survived, what we've overcome. We teach them to be strong, to be prepared, but also to value peace, because we know what the alternative costs." They continued the tour, visiting the medical bay, where Lieutenant Sora Kim showed them the trauma facilities. The Vrexians stared in horror at the cloning tanks, the neural backup systems, the radiation treatment chambers.
"You expect to need all this?"
one aide asked. "We hope to never need any of it," Sora replied. "But hope is not a plan. We prepare for the worst." The final stop was the tactical center where Lieutenant Hannah Song was running her team through simulations. On the displays, complex battle scenarios played out. Humans responded to each one with practiced efficiency. "We run scenarios constantly," Hannah explained. "Ambushes, fleet battles, boarding actions, siege situations. Every possible combat situation we can imagine. When the real thing happens, we want it to feel familiar." Krevnax watched a simulation play out. A human ship was outnumbered 5-1. The crew didn't panic. They fought strategically, using every advantage, making the enemy pay for every meter of space. They lost, but they took 3 enemy ships with them. "That's acceptable to you?" Krevnax asked. "Losing?" "Losing is inevitable sometimes," Hannah said. "What matters is how you lose. Do you make it costly for the enemy? Do you complete your mission? Do you save your people? Victory isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about surviving long enough for help to arrive. Sometimes it's about holding the line, even when you know you won't make it." They returned to the conference room near the bridge. Temin had refreshments prepared, simple rations, but offered with genuine hospitality. The Vrexians sat across from the humans, and for a long moment nobody spoke. Finally, Krevnax broke the silence. "Captain Park, I must ask you something. After everything your species has been through, all the wars, all the death, how do you still have hope?" Temin thought carefully before answering. "Because we remember, Admiral. We remember the wars, yes. We remember the pain and the loss. But we also remember the moments of unity, the times when we came together. After our last great war, humanity made a choice. We decided that we were stronger together than apart. We chose cooperation over conflict. It wasn't easy. We still have disagreements, still have tensions, but we talk instead of fight. We negotiate instead of attack. We built a society based on the lessons we learned from our darkest times. And yet you prepare for war," Krevnax said. "Guys, because peace requires strength," Taman replied. "The weak are conquered. The strong can choose peace. We chose to be strong, so we could choose peace." Krevnax looked at his aides, then back to Taman. "Captain, when we first encountered your ship, we thought you were primitives. A young species that would bow to Vrexian superiority. We planned to intimidate you, to make you submit to our terms." "I know," Taman said. "That's why I let you scan us. I wanted you to see what you were dealing with." You succeeded. "We are terrified of you," Good Temin said calmly. "Fear born from understanding leads to respect. Respect leads to honest negotiation. An honest negotiation leads to peace. That's a lesson humanity learned after thousands of years of war. Krevnak stood, and the humans stood as well. Captain Park, I am going to return to my ship and send an urgent message to the Vrexian High Council. I will recommend immediate diplomatic negotiations with humanity. I will recommend that we settle this territorial dispute through peaceful means and the military confrontation. Inadvisable, Krevnak said firmly. Humanity is not like any species we've encountered. You've lived with death so long that you've learned to master it. You've turned survival into an art form and warfare into a science. A war between our species would devastate us both. Then we are in agreement, Taman said, extending his hand. Peace is preferable. Krevnax took the hand, the human gesture feeling more natural now. Yes, though I suspect it will be a long time before my people stop having nightmares about that scanned data. Taman smiled slightly. Fear fades with familiarity, Admiral. Give it time. Who knows? Perhaps one day our species will be allies. Perhaps, Krevnax agreed, though I suspect it will be a nervous alliance. The Vrexian delegation departed, their shuttle lifting off and returning to their flagship. Within an hour, the entire alien fleet had jumped to faster-than-light travel, heading back to Vrexian space on the bridge of the Defiant. The crew watched them go. Should we stand down from alert status, sir? Ensign Guan asked. Captain Teeman considered, then nodded. Stand down. Return to standard watch. They understand now, Lieutenant Hannah spoke quietly. They look terrified. Good, Taman replied, settling into his command chair. Fear born from understanding leads to respect. Respect leads to peace. That's a lesson humanity learned the hard way, Lieutenant. Perhaps we can teach it to the galaxy without everyone having to pay the same price we did. The Defiant continued its patrol. One human ship among the stars, carrying the weight of 10,000 years of warfare in the hope that they would never have to use it again. Behind them, the Vrexian fleet fled toward home, carrying a message that would change the galaxy forever. Humanity had arrived, and they were unlike anything the universe had ever seen.